look at kind of the burn down trajectory for our story points, it's a bit scary. So one of the things that we're doing as part of this release is we're actually going through and kind of highlighting the retrospective review of the burn down rate. And so if we look at this accepted story points, we were looking at 207, completed story points 88, and then the remaining story points 119. This was about 10 minutes ago, so if anyone has been madly updating Jira, it doesn't account for those updates.
Do we have a history of what our completed story points tend to be over multiple sprints?
Yes, so if you look at Jira, what you can actually do is go to reports, and then under reports, it shows you the various sprints. So if you want to look at,
I'm just wondering, you said whatever it was, 88 points this sprint. If that's been our average over the past 5 sprints, then when we go to planning, we should say, hey, look, anything more than 88 points, we probably don't want to accept.
Yeah, so for example, for sprint 3, we were looking at 94, right? So it really depends on what components are participating. Oh, I think it's gone up a little. So it depends on the components that are participating. So what you'll see here is usually I leave out the folks that haven't updated, but I actually kept them in this time so that we'll note kind of what was planned for, but we didn't have a chance to complete, right?
Okay.
Okay, so let's get started, and then please highlight. So what you'll see in the templates is there's kind of a new item around a retrospective comments. So looking through the slides, I think most people had comments there, so folks can just kind of highlight that. What I want to do is, it would be nice for us to do a full retrospective, so at probably the end of the release, and then get a handle on some of the gotchas and what we can do about it as we head into release planning. Okay, Scott?
Sure. So starting from the first one, refactoring the OpenStack synchronizer that was carried over from last sprint. Got that done. Got the OpenStack synchronizer to use the new refactored synchronizer framework. The next one was mounting certificates inside of XOS containers. Previously, those certificates had to be baked into the container image. This required a container build at runtime. So we got rid of that, and the certificates are now volume mounted inside the containers. Refactoring the build process for core containers. That was getting rid of the part of the onboarding synchronizer that built the core containers and making it a static process that runs on the dev machine. The next task was to integrate that build into the build system. So basically to get the dev machine playbooks to run it at the right time. Fixing Elk Stack logging. This turned out to not be necessary. So all I really had to do was just verify that it currently worked. Fixing soft deleted users weren't being reaped. That was an issue with the user object in the data model. Just because of the way that it's implemented, user doesn't descend from PL Core base. It's the only object that doesn't descend from PL Core base. So there was some changes that got integrated into PL Core base a few sprints back, and they just needed to be brought over to the user object. Fix Redis notifications for foreign key fields not named correctly. This had to do with the Redis event delivery system that it gets a list of fields that are changed whenever a data model object is saved, and it was emitting names for foreign keys that were not the same as the ones that are actually used in the API. So we fixed that. And then finally adding the Xproto resource type to loadable module resource. This was extending the onboarding system to support Xproto and getting a placeholder in place for the Xproto converter to be run at dev time. So in progress is renaming Cord subscriber root to rcord subscriber and moving it to the rcord repo. This one is maybe half done right now. It's unclear exactly whether we want to try to get it in before the feature freeze, or we want to make it an item to do first thing next release. The issue being that it could turn out to be somewhat of a disruptive change if people are going to be integrating and there's an object moving around, as well as perhaps a disruptive change to the Xproto integration that's currently going on. And then finally, my retrospective comment was that Burndown was affected by ONS, both attendance and preparing for the demos. We kind of tried to scope out this sprint with that in mind, but you know, it's always disruptive, so I think it disrupted a little more than I had intended. That's it for me.
Okay, Scott. Sapin?
Hi, so 1093 was debugging and testing the code that we generated out of Xprotos. This ended up taking the bulk of my time and energy, so there was a massive number of bug fixes made to this. Updated both directions of the toolchain, so going from the legacy models to Xproto and back. And this involves two sets of changes, the code that we have in our repository. We also ended up forking that into a GitHub project that now contains a parser of Xproto and protobufs. So there was a legal issue in keeping that code in our repository, and so we're keeping that part of it separately at an external location. And so I've been going through the loop of fixing those bugs, regenerating, testing. Oftentimes, because when you regenerate the whole thing. Once you get a bug in a corner of the code fixed, you cannot be assured that the next change you make will preserve that code in working state. But I'm pretty sure it's at some point went through end-to-end testing, and then things got disrupted in cleanups and layout changes and tweaks and further bug fixes. So I'm pretty sure this is very close to passing end-to-end tests. So 1094 was automatically generating the models and service models based on Xprotos and integrating that with the build process. So the code is laid out, make files written out, we're auto-generating init.py files, which are what take the models and make them available to the rest of the code base. It hasn't been integrated with the core container build that Scott and Andy refactored this sprint. And that's one of the main next steps. 1092 was generating all of the service models. So not only RCord, but also ECord and MCord. So RCord, and so the debugging I mentioned applied to this as well, to generating these service models and fixing the outcome, making fixes going along. Most of the RCord services are done, and they're in testing right now. With ECord and MCord, I went through all of the services and reviewed what needs to get done, actually decomposed them into the pieces that they need to be broken into for them to be converted into Xproto. The generation hasn't been done yet. I don't expect this to be any different from ECord and MCord. There's a couple of services, so there's vPPU and the monitoring service that's pretty complicated, that I think that we should probably defer to the next release and not do as part of this release, because that's pretty problematic. But having gone through the process of decomposition and not seen anything, we're pretty much waiting for a press of a button to generate those things. I chatted with Andrea yesterday, and it looks like in his recent refactorings of some of the eCord services, he's actually moved in the same direction that I did in removing proxy models from certain services, and so it looks like our efforts should align there. So what's pending for this release is still more debugging. I don't see that as being a showstopper, since, as I said, there was a prior version of this setup that actually went through end-to-end tests. And so we're pretty close there to generate all of the eCord and mCord services and to integrate exporter generation with the core container build. So that's where we're at. In terms of the retrospective, so I think this was a fairly large quantum of work. So that's one side of it. And then I gave a couple of presentations, worked on those on the exporter tutorial and another slide set I presented when I was at Menlo Park. And so that took some time out of my schedule. And also there was a build failure where Ansible broke down, or there was a breakage of the version of Ansible that we used that took a few days out of our schedule. So that's it for me.
Thanks, Tapan. So I don't think Matteo joined us since he is getting married today. So what he's been working on is there was a lot of work for ONS, so the ONS demos, creating a environment for the custom views, fixing Safari issues not listening to keyboard events, load models and GUI extensions, and renaming the GUI containers. In progress, adding Elk Stack and to local dev config, and then not started GUI documentation, which we're postponing for the next sprints because next sprint's focus will be bug fixes and documentation. And then there were additions of a lot of unit tests, which will be covered under QA. And then on to refactor, build, and deploy. Andy?
Right, so the refactor, the build and deploy system for tasks for Dangerous Edition, we wrapped them all up during this sprint. So specifically, 651 was about Docker containers restarting on the head node when it rebooted. That's in place. 1033 leveraged the XOS refactoring work that Scott did to allow the XOS service synchronizer images to be built during the build stage and published to the registry. As part of that task, we also retired the onboarding synchronizer and unified the two Docker Compose files that XOS used. So there was one for bootstrapping and another one for onboarding. Now there's just a single one. So we've simplified a lot the way XOS manages containers, and I think it'll make development and deployment a lot easier, as well as pave the road for making it pretty easy to slot in something like Kubernetes as a method of managing the infrastructure containers on the head node, if we choose to do that at some point. 1077 and 1078 were tasks about verifying and documenting various developer workflows post all of this refactoring that's been going on. So there is a document about developer workflows in the Dangerous Editions folder. It's, I think, pretty complete, but obviously it's still a work in progress as we improve the system. A couple of tasks were added to the sprint based on stuff that blew up. So the first, Sapin already mentioned fixing the Ansible versioning issue. This is work that Sapin did, and it as he mentioned, it interfered with the Xproto work. So now Ansible is locked to a specific version that, as far as we know, is not going to disappear on us. And that change has been made to both master and Cord 2.0 branches, because they were both blocked on that. The other issue was 11.16. This was an issue with changes in the ONOS ML2 driver that is maintained by the OpenStack project. We had been using the head of their master branch, and some changes were checked into that head that were incompatible with the software that we're using. So we fixed that and locked it to a specific commit that is known to work. And that was also ported to master and Cord 2.0. So those are all the tasks. There was no tasks that were left undone. The retrospective comment is basically the same as everybody else's so far, that the burn down rate was affected by the ONS demos. That always takes some time, as well as these issues that popped up with Ansible and the ONOS ML2 driver. So that's it.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Fabric, Charles?
Okay, so sorry. So in the sprint, we built a Mininet environment to emulate Fabric plus vRouter, basically everything we have nowadays. So before we have only environment for Fabric, we also have a separate environment for vRouter, but right now we put it all together. So it's a pretty nice script. So there is also a link on so you can click on the link and you can go there, take a look. We already have single home environment. Still working on the dual home environment. And about the dual homing feature, we identify several changes that need to be done in ONOS and also semi-routing app to support the dual homing, but we haven't really started working on it. And also last week, we also spent the entire week working with Acton and Broadcom to debug current issues. So for the retrospective point, so again, as most of the people on us and Comcast visit took half of the sprint away. So, and also the crew run issue also took a lot of time, like probably the entire week last week. In order to address this problem in the future, we had a discussion with Comcast, Acton, and Broadcom last week about how can we kind of offload this debugging things a little bit to the communities, and not really a community, basically offload that to Broadcom and Acton, and instead of like just Saurav and I doing that. So hopefully Saurav and I can focus more on the Fabric features in the future. That's all from me.
Okay, thanks, Charles. And then just a comment for folks. The retrospective really helps if folks add kind of their accepted, done, and in progress story points. It kind of highlights, right, what was done versus not. Because I think one of the things that we lack as part of how we're tracking Jira, at least for Cord, is the per scrum or per feature burn down rate. And so what you see is kind of the global all Cord rather than, right, what's working within each scrum versus things
okay.
that. Okay, so thanks, Charles. So Jitra, were you going to cover this?
Yeah, sure. So for QA, for this sprint, the first task, 11:33, that one was for Matteo. And since he's not there, I can cover for him. So he had been working on to increase some of the unit tests as part of the XYS GUI repo. and then he had already finished that, and then he added it as part of the Jenkins job as well. So that task is completed. And then the next tasks are all pure QA related. 1065 is about converging control plane and data plane tests. So we had this task since some time. We had individually achieved some control plane tests and data plane tests. So in this sprint, we were able to achieve like the convergence of control plane and data plane tests. So with the help of few Sienna engineers as well, we had approached and then changed the framework a little bit in order to achieve these tests to happen. And we were able to run some of the tests from end-to-end perspective. And there are more tests to achieve, but at least the framework as part of the automation framework is ready so that we can go forward and add more tests towards it. So for this, as part of this task is completed, so we can close this. And the other part of the convergence of control plane and data plane is also about BTN tests as well. So there is some part of BTN tests, that framework that we had added more tests as well. So that task, that is as part of 1089. And the next task was about Jenkins CI job to validate containers. This job will listen to changes of for any XOS services, and it deploys appropriate profile like the front end mock or cohort mock ECOD, and then it puts to test, and then it validates the various containers by starting them and the processes that are running, and then it verifies if the correct volumes are mounted. So there now we have also put in as part of the Jenkins separates as Jenkins job in order to validate this test. And the next 1061 is about porting XOS API test to Chameleon. So earlier we thought that we wanted to port all the XOS API tests to Chameleon, but after a discussion with Scott and Matteo, we thought like we will create new tests, and we had already created some tests separately for Chameleon. The idea behind that was we want to use the existing XOS API test to test the older for any change sets for the older releases like 2.0. So now going forward, so we will have new tests written for Chameleon as well. And there were some issues running some Chameleon APIs, but we were able to achieve some of them, so it's going fine. And more tests will be created as part of the next sprints. For this, investigation of this task is completed in the sprint. And the next 1034 is about the physical pod. We have achieved, we got the setup by Luca at the QCT lab, and we got the resources for the QA pod. And we had tried earlier, the pods were all installed with 2.0, but now since we want to put the master load on that, finally we were able to build a successful pod with master load. With some the Ansible playbook issue was fixed, and then we have also made some changes to the Jenkins job in order to make it possible. So now finally the physical pod with master build is working successfully fine now. And going forward, we will be porting the existing tests that we had achieved on CIAB to work on physical pod as well. So that's it for QA.
Okay, thanks, Suchitra. Zach?
So for this sprint, I got the Open Cloud Deployment flavor working. It still isn't integrated because it doesn't have a, it differs in terms of build system, and it differs in terms of build topology than the conventional Cord builds. But it's functional. It's probably going to get merged once we move past this release. In progress was using SSL and authentication on the Docker registry. We touched the Docker registry in so many different places that getting the clients all to authorize and to know certificates and whatnot is quite difficult. So once we come to a scenario where that is dealt with, we can proceed there. I'm currently working on centralized cord artifact builds. Now that we have the tagging in and labeling for those, I'll be able to build, and we'll be able to pull down and get pull down a commit or a image that matches a specific commit. And then also parallel build and download of Docker images. That's sort of depends on the centralized builds or our centralized artifact builds. Just retrospectively, the way that we've been developing the cord pod structure is really, we've optimized for that and nothing else. Sometimes the harm of front end or other deployments, obviously to the detriment of anyone who's using, for example, anything other than the dev node, head node, compute nodes scenario. So I guess we need to think about that going forward if we're going to force that on everyone who uses any portion of cord code.
Okay, thanks, Zach. I think these are things that we should start addressing as part of the brainstorming sessions. And then Volta, I think the comment I have here is, I think work is getting started. Saraf was picking this up, so my assumption is he'll be the contact for this once that gets ramped up. And then eCord, Andrea?
Yes. So we did the gap evaluation on what was needed to bring the services up and running with the new build system and Explodo. And we already did the deployment, the new deployment files. So that was already done. And we removed the dependency in the VEG that conflicted with the Explodo. That was basically done. I had a discussion with Sapin this yesterday and partially this morning to make sure that was done. There's still some need to be things to do to completely build Explodo, especially the splitting files, and that is why some of it is in progress, especially some implementations. The Docker files are there, the make files and the .sh files to bring the services to the new build and the Docker containers method are there, and they run with Code in a Box build that tested as April 14. I had to stop testing with Code in a Box because of the Ansible failures and mass issues that I've been seeing, so that's why it's not done. And it's not ported to master yet because of the same failure. I wanted to stay on a reliable environment, and I ported it today to master because I knew that we could start testing again with the Code in a Box build that works. And we didn't start the Explodo conversion of the models because there's still some splitting of files needed, and we did not start any Enterprise Edge implementation, nor in the service part, nor in the application part, because we figured out that the time was needed to bring up with the profiles for the new build, and also because that we will be having some discussions around the future of eCord and what exactly is needed for this flavor of cord. So we don't want to burn energy in any things that might be not so important in the future. So we are actively discussing what's the future and also searching for some partner-driven use cases that could help us better focus on what is priority for eCord. And we'll keep you updated on that side. And this is also why some of our stories didn't get done, because we decided to not deprioritize them, and some of them were related to the Ansible and ONS things that other people discussed before. That's it on my side.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. Report integration, and then V10. I didn't see an update from Hyunsoon. Dangerous additions. So next week we're starting sprint 6. what you'll see is this is our final sprint. So as of today, we should be feature frozen. I think there are some known exceptions, and so those will have to be tracked. But the focus for Sprint 6 is going to be bug fixes and documentation. We also have release planning coming up on May 2nd with some brainstorming sessions up front to kind of identify the developer pain points and how we want to address those. The release is targeted for May 15th for Dangerous Edition. Monday, there will be a Sprint 6 planning session at 2. And then just a quick note on the platform build refactoring done. Xproto toolchain is being integrated, so that is being monitored. That's it. And then I just want to comment on, thank you for all the retrospective comments. They were really helpful. I think there was a general theme in there of, you know, either visits or preparing for demos, ONS demos. And so as we look at this, how do we go about better planning for efforts like that? So I think these will require further discussion. But I also want to point out that the intent of the retrospective comments is not to be critical. It's intended for us as a team to figure out if there are patterns to the burn down rate so that we can all work together to try to address it. Okay? Thanks, everyone. And I will close out the sprint probably by noon today, and then I'll start up the next one, and then we'll go into planning session next Monday. Okay. Have a good day.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Jen. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.